Hi class, it's Schuber here. This is chapter 5 of October Sky, titled Quentin. Quentin was the class joke. He used a lot of big words and delivered in a falsetto English accent. He carried an old, cracked leather briefcase stuffed to overflowing with books and who knows what else. While the rest of us played dodgeball or did calisthenics in phys ed class, he always had some excuse not to participate. A sprained ankle or a headache or some such, and sat on the bleachers, and read one of the books. While the other students traded gossip and nonsense in the auditorium in the morning at lunch, Quentin always sat alone. He had no friends as far as I could tell, although everybody, including me, made fun of him. I was pretty certain he was some sort of genius. He could expand on nearly any subject until the teacher asked him to stop. And if he ever made less than 100% on a test, I wasn't aware of it. I figured if there was anybody who might know how to build a rocket, it was Quentin. The next morning, before class, I sat down beside him in the auditorium. Startled, he pulled back his book to his face. "I don't let anyone copy my homework," he said suspiciously. "I don't want to copy your homework," I replied. Although I would have taken his algebra if he had offered it. "Do you know anything about rockets?" I asked him. A smile came across his face. Quentin wasn't a bad-looking kid for a genius. He had a narrow face, a sharp nose, crisp blue eyes, and jet black hair that looked as if it had been plastered down with a quart of wild root cream oil. I wondered how long it would take for you to come to me with that question. "I heard about your rocket, old boy. Blew it up, didn't it? What made you think you could build a rocket? You can't even do algebra." "I'm getting better," I muttered. It was amazing to me that everybody, even Quentin, knew my business. "One of my little sisters can already do algebra," he advised me. "I taught her. It's really that simple." In less than a minute, I'd already been pretty much irritated. "So, you do know about rockets?" I asked him. "Anything?" "I know everything," he replied. He said it too easily. "Let's hear it then," I said, doubtfully. He raised one of his bony shoulders in a shrug. "What's in it for me?" "What do you want?" "To help you build the next one." That was a surprise. "If you know so much, why don't you build your own?" I demanded. Quentin built a little church with his hands. I've considered building rockets for some time, if you must know. Practical reasons, unfortunately, have prevented me from taking action. It takes teamwork to build a rocket, and materials. My observation of you is that you have certain leadership abilities that I do not. He locked his eyes on me. They were intense, almost capable of shooting rays. "The other boys will follow you," he said. "And you, being Colwood's superintendent's son, can probably get any materials that you need." His ray gun eyes made me want to look away, but I didn't. "What's your angle?" I demanded. "Ha!" he exclaimed. "The same as you, old chap. If I learn how to build a rocket, I can stand a better chance of getting down at the Cape. You got to go to college first." And when he says Cape, he's talking about Cape Cod, where NASA is starting up at. "You got to go to college," I reminded him. "I'll go to college," he said resolutely. "But it won't hurt to get some good practical rocket building experience under my belt." He put out his hands. "How about it? You and I team up." It was the best offer I'd gotten since I started my rocket building career. But I was still a little reluctant. I didn't have much of a reputation at Big Creek, but it was still better than Quentin's. When I didn't respond to his hand, he grabbed mine and shook it. big strokes up and down. I hastily pulled away and looked around to see if nobody noticed. I knew the football boys would accuse me of holding hands with Quentin if any of them had seen it. "So, what do you want to know?" he demanded, my face flushed with potential embarrassment in it all. "Calm down, old chap," he said. "I shall become perfectly clear." He leaned back and took a deep breath and began to talk just as if he was reading something straight from a book. "The Chinese are reputed to have invented rocketry, something called Chinese arrows, to have mentioned in Europe and in the Middle East as far back as the 13th century. The British used rockets later aboard their warships during the Napoleonic Wars and the War of 1812. That's where rocket's red glare comes from, in the Star-Spangled Banner, that is. Then there was the Russian Tchaikovsky. I'm not pronouncing it right. Goddard the American, and von Braun, of course. Each of them added to the body of rocket knowledge. Tchaikovsky was a theorist. Goddard applied the engineering principles, and I stopped him at that. "I don't need to know that stuff. I need to know how a rocket works." Quentin cocked his head. "But it's so elementary. It's Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction." I remember that from science class, or another thing about Newton, but I couldn't put my finger on his laws. "How do you know about that?" "I read it somewhere." "Read it where?" Quentin frowned, disturbed at my attempt to cut through his bull. "A physics book, I suppose," he said stiffly. "Can't exactly say which one. I thumb over to Welch every Saturday to the county library. I tend to pick up on random shelves and just read every book on it until I'm done." I could see it was going to be necessary to be more specific with Quentin. "What kind of fuel does a rocket use?" "The Chinese use black powder." "Black powder?" He looked at me carefully to determine if I was joking. "Black powder. It contains potassium nitrate. Salt, Peter. You know, charcoal and sulfur." "Scepter?" Quentin sighed, then explained in some details the chemical properties. It was oxidizer, which when combined with other chemicals produced heat and gas necessary to make a rocket fly. It can also kill you down there. He finished up, pointing up his yoo-hoo. You know what I mean? "It fixes men so they can't, you know." "What?" Quentin said, flushed. "You know," he straightened up, crooked his finger. "That!" "Really?" "Well, that's what I read." I thought I'd better go back to rockets. "Where can I buy some of this black powder stuff?" "You can't buy it as far as I know," he said. "You've got to mix it. Salt, pepper, sulfur, and charcoal. And that's what we need. Can you get it?" I wasn't certain, but I wasn't going to let him know it. "I'll get it, all right." Quentin grinned broadly and suddenly started to rattle on like I was his best friend. He opened his briefcase and showed me the books within, most of them on general science, but one of them titled Tropic of Cancer. "You want to know about girls? This is the one," he said shyly. "I already know about girls." He tapped the book. "No, you don't." When the bell rang, we stood up. I noticed for the first time Quentin's worn, faded shirt, thin at the elbows, his patched cotton pants, and his scuffed ankle-high shoes. Quentin wasn't a Colwood boy. He came from Bartley. He was one of the kids my mother told me to notice. The mine at Bartley was always having cutoffs and strikes. In the last few years, many Bartley families had slid into poverty and misery. Quentin's father was probably out of a job. In 1957, southern West Virginia, you wouldn't likely starve if you didn't have any money. There was always bread and commodity cheese you could get from the government, but that was about all there was. All right, I'm going to pause there, focus on what Sonny is doing to get an idea of what rocketry is, and also take special notice of his new friend Quentin, how he's very, very smart, but if you couldn't tell from his clothes, he's also very, very poor. Let me know if you have any questions. This is halfway through chapter 5.